Ever find yourself daydreaming about opening a restaurant? Okay, maybe it's just me, like all the time. But even if your culinary adventures are more perfecting that sourdough starter, trust me, this deep dive is seriously fascinating for everyone.
It's true.
We're about to uncover what it really takes to launch a restaurant in Bahrain.
All right, yeah.
It's this really unique blend of like serious culinary ambition meeting this really specific set of Middle Eastern rules and regs.
You might be thinking, Bahrain? Why Bahrain? You know, it's funny you should say that because Bahrain isn't your typical restaurant scene. It's kind of this melting pot of cultures, right? And then you've got this hub for international business and tourism, all these things happening, which creates this really fascinating set of opportunities.
Yeah.
But of course, you know, along with those opportunities come challenges, right?
Right.
Especially for someone who's actually brave enough to try and, you know, enter the food industry there.
Right. I mean, talk about a recipe for success or a recipe for disaster if you go in blind. That's why we're digging into this guide today. It's from a Menuville blog called How to Start a Restaurant in Bahrain.
Yeah.
And it really goes beyond just, you know, find a location, hire a chef. It gets into the nitty-gritty of permits and like cultural considerations you might not even think about, just the reality of how to actually stand out in a market that's already bursting with flavor.
And that's what I think makes this guide so valuable. It's that really interesting blend of super practical advice, you know, paired with this real-world insight. So we're not just going to sit here and tell you what to do. It's more about why these things matter, especially in a place as unique as Bahrain.
Okay, so let's unpack some of this, because one of the first things that jumped out at me reading this was that almost half of Bahrain's population are expats.
Wow, yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's a massive potential customer base who, you know, they're craving maybe a taste of home. So imagine you're a chef. You specialize in, say, I don't know, classic French cuisine. Suddenly, setting up shop in Bahrain, maybe with a cozy little Parisian-style bakery.
Right.
Sounds like a gold mine, right?
Absolutely. And it kind of speaks to like the larger trend of globalization and cultural exchange that we see happening, especially, you know, within the food industry. Restaurants are more than just a place to go and, you know, be fed nowadays.
Right.
They really offer this unique way to experience different cultures, and what better way than through the cuisine, right?
For sure.
But then it also kind of brings up this question of, well, how do you cater to such a diverse clientele like that when you have so many different tastes, so many different expectations? Are you going to specialize, or are you going to try and be everything to everyone?
Talk about a culinary balancing act. And if that wasn't enough to juggle, you've got these massive events like the Bahrain Grand Prix, which just bring in this sudden influx of visitors, all with their own, you know, unique palates and expectations.
Yeah, it's like this fascinating case study for anyone who's interested in the intersection of food and global culture. And this guide really does dive deep into these nuances, which is, I think, really eye-opening, even if you're not, you know, a total foodie.
Okay, so we've got this melting pot of cultures, a booming foodie scene. Sounds like a dream, right? But hold your horses before you start whipping up that business plan, because this is where we have to talk about, you know, the dreaded permits and licenses. And this guide does not sugarcoat it. Navigating the bureaucratic side of setting up shop in Bahrain is no picnic.
Yeah, forget the Michelin star for a second. You've got to conquer this mountain of paperwork first.
Right.
We're talking commercial registration, municipality licenses, approvals from something called the LMRA, that's the Labor Market Regulatory Authority. And then, of course, you've got to meet all the food safety standards on top of that.
Right.
I know.
I'm exhausted just hearing that. It's like they threw the entire Bahraini legal code at us before we even ordered appetizers.
It's a lot, and that's why this guide is so great, because it really emphasizes starting this process early on, being meticulous about your organization, because you don't want to wait till the last minute and feel like you've bitten off way more than you can chew.
Okay, so early planning is crucial. Got it. And speaking of which, the article also dives into like this whole labyrinth of Bahrain's labor laws, particularly around hiring foreign staff, which it sounds like can be a major hurdle for new businesses.
It's a huge takeaway, honestly. Even if you're not planning on opening a restaurant, just understanding a country's labor regulations, especially when it comes to, you know, foreign workers, is so essential for any business that's operating internationally. And it's important to remember, you know, these rules aren't just bureaucratic hurdles. They actually reflect, you know, the country's values, their priorities.
That's a really good point. So we're already starting to see this bigger picture emerge, right? It's not just about the food, as you said. It's about navigating these like cultural differences, these legal complexities, and really truly understanding, you know, the lay of the land.
Exactly. And this guide really does a fantastic job of giving you the tools and the insights to do just that. And it's really interesting, in Bahrain, there's a strong emphasis on fairness and worker protection, which you see reflected in their labor laws. So that's something to keep in mind as you're going through that process of, staffing your dream restaurant.
It's a good reminder that what might seem like, red tape at first glance has these like deeper cultural and ethical roots. But let's maybe shift gears for a sec from the regulatory maze to the more, shall we say, delicious aspects of running a restaurant, especially in Bahrain. And one thing I really appreciated about this guide is it doesn't shy away from, the potential pitfalls.
I agree. It's kind of refreshing, actually. It's like a reality check alongside the dream, reminding us that success in any competitive market, right, especially the restaurant industry, requires a healthy dose of realism.
Well,
And yeah, careful planning doesn't hurt either.
for sure. And one of the challenges that really jumped out at me was this whole art of pricing your dishes, because you've got this really diverse market. You've got expats who might be accustomed to paying a premium for certain cuisines, and then you have locals who might be, more budget conscious. So how do you find that sweet spot?
Yeah, it's a real balancing act. You want to make sure you're covering your costs. Of course, got to keep those profit margins healthy. But at the same time, you need to make sure you are appealing to a broad enough customer base. And I think this guide really emphasized the importance of doing your homework, like really thorough market research to actually understand what your target demographic is willing to pay.
Makes sense. It's not just about, cooking delicious food. It's about understanding the market you're serving.
Yeah.
Speaking of challenges, though, the guide also mentions that operational costs can be a real deal breaker, especially for those like prime locations everyone dreams of.
Oh, absolutely. Rent in a high traffic area can really eat into your profits faster than you can say, Bahraini spiced lamb chops.
Yep.
And that's where, again, smart planning and negotiation come into play. This guy talks a lot about, the importance of securing favorable lease terms, maybe exploring things like energy efficient equipment to cut down on those pesky utility bills. Every little bit helps.
Totally. Every little bit helps. But even if you have nailed the perfect location, you've got this incredible menu, there's still this ever-present challenge of staying ahead of the curve when it comes to food trends, because those customer preferences, they shift like the desert sands. Staying relevant, especially in such a globalized food scene, can feel like you're trying to hit a moving target sometimes.
Yeah, especially in the age of social media where a dish can go viral one day and then the next it's old news.
Right.
It's a fast-paced world for restaurateurs these days. But the guide does offer some really interesting tips for navigating this, like really analyzing your menu, being open to incorporating new ingredients, maybe new dishes, even collaborating with food bloggers or influencers, to kind of tap into what's emerging.
Oh, collaborating with influencers, that's a smart move. And it highlights just how important marketing is in this day and age, which reminds me, this guide mentioned something I thought was really interesting. Well, obviously, online marketing is crucial these days.
Oh, for sure.
We'll get into that,
Right.
don't worry.
Yeah.
But it sounds like those more traditional methods, things like print ads, community partnerships, they're still incredibly effective in Bahrain, which I thought was fascinating.
I thought it was interesting, too. It just reminds you that not everybody is, glued to their smartphones 24/7. And building those relationships within the community, that still carries a lot of weight, especially in a place like Bahrain where, they place a high value on those personal connections.
That's such a great point. Now let's talk about the online world, because this guide really emphasized the importance of, building a strong online presence, especially for restaurants that are really hoping to target, tourists or that large expat community we talked about. We're talking online reviews, social media engagement, basically creating this really enticing digital storefront for your restaurant.
Yeah, you want people to be able to find you and get a sense of the vibe and the menu, all of that. And honestly, never underestimate the power of online reviews. The guide highlighted platforms like TripAdvisor and Zomato, which are hugely influential, especially for tourists who are, looking for dining recommendations. I mean, a handful of glowing reviews can really make a world of difference in attracting those new customers.
It's like digital word of mouth, and it is incredibly powerful. Speaking of things that are super important, this next challenge is something I'm personally passionate about, and that's managing food waste.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's huge, not just ethically, but financially, too, because nobody wins when you've got perfectly good food ending up in the trash.
Yeah.
The guide actually had some really interesting suggestions, practical strategies like portion control, maybe offering like different portion sizes to accommodate different appetites, menu engineering to minimize waste, and even getting creative about repurposing ingredients.
Yes, like turning leftover veggies into a soup or using bread ends to make croutons. It's a win-win for everyone.
Huh.
And speaking of wins, let's talk about some of the ways this guide suggests that, once you have a handle on those challenges, you can really set yourself up for success. What are your thoughts?
Well, I love how this guide is so action-oriented, right? Like, it gives you these actionable tips you can actually use.
Well,
So, for example, to kind of combat that risk of those high operational costs, especially in those prime locations, they suggest, maybe consider an alternative location, something that's a little more off the beaten path, might have lower rent, or even just thinking outside the box with, a slightly smaller, more efficient kitchen setup.
those are great tips. And I love how it encourages you to kind of think creatively and find the solutions that work for, your unique situation. Another thing that really stuck out to me was how much emphasis they put on understanding and utilizing SEO.
Oh, right, search engine optimization.
Yes. Basically, making sure that when people are searching online for restaurants,
Which, let's be honest, we all do.
right, that your restaurant pops up at the top of the list.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
visibility, right?
Like digital marketing 101 for restaurateurs. You could have, honestly, the most amazing restaurant in the world, but if nobody can find you online, it's like you don't even exist.
Exactly. So to recap, we've got to master pricing, location, marketing, both online and offline, and find ways to, minimize our environmental impact. It's a lot to juggle, but this guide really does make me feel like it's all possible with the right approach. It's amazing what you can learn from a deep dive like this, even if, we're not all rushing out to open a restaurant in Bahrain tomorrow. I feel like there are so many good takeaways here that apply to other businesses or honestly just to life in general.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree. It's like this episode has been a masterclass in like how to navigate cultural differences, understanding those legal frameworks, and, just adapting to this constantly changing, global market.
Right. It's like they say, the world is your oyster, but maybe with a side of hummus and some, delicious Bahraini spices.
I love it.
Speaking of Bahrain, though, this guide left us with a pretty thought-provoking question, and I'm curious to get your take on it. Given everything we've learned about, like, the complexities and the opportunities of Bahrain's restaurant scene, what type of restaurant concept do you think would be most successful there today?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It really makes you think about all these factors we've been discussing, right? The cultural preferences, the market trends, those regulatory hurdles, even ethical considerations like, sustainability is becoming such a big thing.
It's like you're trying to create this perfect dish, but you have to account for the taste buds of an entire nation, basically.
Exactly. But, if I had to like place a bet on a winning concept, I'd say it would have to be a restaurant that successfully marries that like global demand for a unique dining experience, right?
Yeah.
With a deep respect for, local tastes, local sourcing.
Okay, so like a farm to table,
Kind of, yeah.
but with a Bahraini twist.
Exactly. Something that caters to both, right?
Yeah.
Like you've got that adventurous palate of maybe expats who are looking for these new flavors, but then you're also honoring that local desire for like the comfort food, but with an exciting twist.
I love it.
And I think, by emphasizing that local sourcing, you're not only supporting Bahraini farmers, the producers, all of that, but you're also tapping into this growing trend of sustainable and ethical eating, which is huge.
It's huge.
So it's kind of like a win-win for everybody.
That's brilliant. It ticks all those boxes,
Awesome.
cultural sensitivity, adaptability to these like global trends, a commitment to quality, and it's a compelling story to tell. I can already see the marketing campaign. Experience the heart of Bahrain, one delicious bite at a time.
Oh, I love it. See, this is what makes these deep dives so rewarding. It sparks these like unexpected connections and gets us thinking creatively about these topics, we might not have otherwise.
Couldn't have said it better myself. To our listeners, we hope this deep dive has been as enlightening and inspiring for you as it has been for us. And hey, if you had any aha moments listening to this, maybe you're now daydreaming about opening your own culinary empire. We want to hear about it. Until next time, happy exploring, and maybe we'll see you in Bahrain someday, sampling all the latest culinary delights.